Hey everyone! Today we're talking about the incredible story of how ancient Rome began and grew into one of the most powerful civilizations in history. The story of Rome's beginning starts way back on April 21, 753 BCE. According to legend, two brothers named Romulus and Remus, who were said to be part god, were at the center of it all. These brothers argued over who would be in charge or where to build their city. Things got so heated that Romulus ended up killing Remus. He then named the city Rome after himself. While this is the most famous story about how Rome started, it's not the only one. Another tale says the city was named after a woman called Roma. She was part of a group of survivors from the Trojan War, led by a man named Aeneas. When they arrived near the Tiber River, Roma and the women in the group burned the ships so no one could leave. This forced everyone to stay and build a settlement that would later become Rome. Aeneas's story is also in a famous poem called the Aeneid, which connects Rome's history to the ancient city of Troy. Some people think Rome's name might have come from Rumon, an old name for the Tiber River. Others say it could have been based on an Etruscan word related to one of their towns. Either way, the location along the Tiber River was key to Rome's early success. Rome started as a small town, but grew quickly because of trade. The river made it easy for merchants to move goods. Over time, Rome was ruled by 7 kings, starting with Romulus and ending with a ruler named Tarquin the Proud. The Greeks influenced early Roman culture a lot. From them, the Romans learned about reading, writing, religion, and architecture. But they didn't just copy, they made it their own. The Etruscans, who lived north of Rome, also played a big role. They were great at trade and city building, and the Romans learned a lot from them. By the 8th to 6th centuries BCE, Rome had grown into a wealthy city. Things changed when the last king, Tarquin the Proud, was kicked out in 509 BCE. A man named Lucius Junius Brutus took over and set up the Roman Republic, where leaders were chosen instead of inherited. While trade helped Rome in its early days, war made it a superpower. The Punic Wars, fought against a city called Carthage between 264 and 146 BCE, were a game-changer. Carthage was Rome's biggest rival for control of Mediterranean trade. After defeating Carthage, Rome became the dominant power, although pirates still caused problems at sea. As Rome's power grew, so did its problems. Corruption and greed were everywhere, and the reliance on slaves created huge gaps between rich and poor. Many Romans lost their jobs because slave labor was cheaper. Some of these unemployed people became part of gangs hired by wealthy senators to do their dirty work. The rich, known as patricians, got richer, while the poor, called plebeians, struggled to survive. In the 2nd century BCE, two brothers named Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus tried to fix these problems. They wanted to give land to the poor and make the government less corrupt. Sadly, both brothers were killed, but their efforts did lead to some changes. The Senate, although still corrupt, started being more careful about how they acted. By the time the first triumvirate came along, Rome was at its peak, both as a city and as a republic. As Rome's republic grew, so did the tension between its social classes. On one side, there were the optimates, who were wealthy and believed in keeping the traditional power of the Senate. On the other side, the populares supported changes that would help ordinary people. These weren't formal political parties, but groups with very different ideas about how Rome should be run. This division ran deep, and would eventually lead to some of the most dramatic conflicts in Roman history. The clash between the optimates and populares became more than just a political disagreement. It represented the growing inequality in Roman society, where the wealthy elite thrived while the working class and poor struggled. The optimates wanted to preserve the status quo, keeping most of the power within the Senate, which was dominated by the aristocracy. Meanwhile, the populares pushed for reforms that would distribute wealth more fairly, including land redistribution and expanded rights for ordinary citizens. These two ideologies weren't just about politics, they were about the future of Rome itself. This growing divide eventually involved three famous figures: Marcus Licinius Crassus, Gnaeus Pompey, known as Pompey the Great, and Gaius Julius Caesar. Together, they formed an alliance modern historians call the First Triumvirate. Back then, though, it wasn't called that, not even by the men involved. It was more of a power-sharing deal to help each of them achieve their goals while keeping their rivals in check. Crassus was the richest man in Rome, but his wealth didn't bring him the respect he craved. He wanted to be seen as a great military leader, like Pompey and Caesar. Crassus was also notorious for his corruption. He controlled Rome's first fire brigade, but it wasn't the public service you might imagine. If someone's house caught fire, Crassus would show up and demand payment before sending his men to help. If the homeowner refused, the house would burn to the ground. While this might sound ruthless, it was just one of many ways Crassus accumulated his vast fortune, which made him a powerful force in Roman politics. Pompey, on the other hand, had already earned his fame as a general. He expanded Rome's territories and brought home immense wealth, gaining the admiration of both the Senate and the people. Caesar, the youngest of the trio, was a rising star in Roman politics. He was charismatic, clever, and deeply popular with the common people. Caesar's ability to connect with the masses made him a natural leader for the populares, while Pompey and Crassus leaned more toward the optimates. Together, the three men worked to strengthen Rome, but their alliance was built on shaky ground. Crassus, determined to prove himself as a military leader, led an army against Parthia in 53 BCE. It was a disastrous campaign. Crassus was defeated and killed at the Battle of Carrhae, a humiliating loss that ended his ambitions and weakened the triumvirate. With Crassus gone, the fragile alliance between Pompey and Caesar quickly unraveled. Their rivalry turned into a bitter conflict that would change Rome forever. Pompey aligned himself with the Senate, using legal charges to try to weaken Caesar. The Senate ordered Caesar to return to Rome without his army, hoping to strip him of his power. But Caesar wasn't about to back down. In 49 BCE, he made a bold and fateful decision. He crossed the Rubicon River with his army, openly defying the Senate's authority. This act of rebellion sparked a civil war that would determine the future of Rome. Caesar's army, though smaller in number, was highly skilled and fiercely loyal. In 48 BCE, Caesar faced Pompey's larger force at the Battle of Pharsalus in Greece. Against the odds, Caesar emerged victorious. Pompey fled to Egypt, hoping to find refuge, but instead he was assassinated upon arrival. This shocking turn of events left Caesar as the undisputed leader of Rome. With Pompey gone, Caesar took control of the city. The Senate named him dictator, a title that gave him extraordinary powers. Caesar used this authority to implement sweeping reforms aimed at improving life for ordinary Romans. He reorganized the government, reduced debt, and expanded citizenship to people in the provinces. His popularity with the common people soared, but not everyone was pleased. Many senators saw Caesar's actions as a threat to the Republic. They feared he was becoming too powerful, and might declare himself king. In 44 BCE, a group of senators, including Brutus and Cassius, plotted to remove Caesar from power. On the Ides of March, they carried out their plan, stabbing Caesar to death during a Senate meeting. The assassination was meant to save the Republic, but it had the opposite effect. Instead of restoring order, Caesar's death plunged Rome into chaos. In the power vacuum left by Caesar's assassination, three men rose to prominence: Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal ally; Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir and grandnephew; and Lepidus, a general and politician. These three formed the Second Triumvirate, vowing to avenge Caesar's death. Together, they defeated the forces of Brutus and Cassius at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE. But like the First Triumvirate, this alliance was doomed by ambition and mistrust. Lepidus was sidelined early on, leaving Antony and Octavian to share power. Antony controlled the eastern territories, while Octavian ruled the west. However, Antony's relationship with Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, caused a rift between the two. Cleopatra was a powerful and charismatic leader, and her alliance with Antony threatened Octavian's position. The tension between them escalated into another civil war. In 31 BCE, their forces clashed at the Battle of Actium, a naval battle that would decide the fate of Rome. Octavian's fleet emerged victorious, forcing Antony and Cleopatra to retreat. Facing defeat, both Antony and Cleopatra took their own lives, ending their dramatic story. With no rivals left, Octavian became the sole ruler of Rome. In 27 BCE, the Senate granted him the title Augustus, marking the beginning of a new era. As the first Roman emperor, Augustus transformed Rome from a republic into an empire, setting the stage for centuries of imperial rule.